A question I get asked very often is, do I need to go to church if I'm a Christian? Can't I just be a Christian and keep that relationship confidential between me and the Lord, and maybe watch church on TV or on the net or on Zoom, join Zoom church? Well, that's like saying, well, I'm a hockey player, but I'm not going to go practice with my team. I'm not going to go and play tournaments with my hockey team. I'm just going to play hockey on my own. That's how silly it sounds. It's like saying I'm a soldier, but I'm not going to be with with the army. I'm not going to be with my brigade. I'm not going to be with my team. I'm going to be a private soldier. And here's the problem, is that most of the time these are just excuses that people make because they don't want to be committed to a local church, and they don't want to come under the authority of the elders of the local church. And people need to realize that it is disobedience against Jesus Christ to not associate and fellowship with brothers and sisters that he has redeemed with his precious blood, people that he's called to himself to create that new person, that new entity called the church. And so to avoid church is to show disdain to the family of God. It's also to show disdain to Christ, who is the head of his body, the church. Hebrews 10:25 says that we are not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, as is the habit of some, especially as we see that day approach, that is, the day of Christ's return. And so Scripture tells us in Hebrews 10:25 that we are not to forsake that assembling. And those who forsake the assembly of believers, and again, when Paul's writing his letters, he's not writing just to an individual. And when he does write to an individual like Timothy or Titus, he's writing in the context of the whole church, that is, Timothy and Titus being elders in the church. And so when Paul writes his letters to the Corinthians and Philippians, and even when James writes his letter to the dispersed Jews in the diaspora, the Jewish believers, they're writing to communities. And when we observe the ordinances, baptism and the Lord's Supper, that is done in community. And so, to put it in the words of the great Christian writer Cyprian, the Bishop of Carthage, from the middle of the 3rd century, he says, you cannot have God as your father if you do not have the church as your mother. And so if you're a Christian, you need to find a local church, a solid biblical local church. You need to join that church, and you need to be accountable to the elders of the church that God has appointed. And so, if you're a Christian and you're not going to church, you are walking in disobedience